Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Happy to see you here. If you'd like to put in where you're connecting from today in the chat, feel free. Love to hear it. I'm connecting from Michigan, Hell, Michigan. You'll have to help me get out of hell, Karen. No, I'm just doing a little joke. So it is a wonderful town, though. People are calling from Loveland, New Jersey, BC, Canada, New Hampshire, Lafayette. That's my town. Whitefish, Montana. I've been to that resort. That's a beautiful area. Portland, Beaverton, Oregon, St. Paul, Minnesota, Richmond, Virginia. Wonderful. Well, thank you, everybody, for being here. As people start to come in, we'll go ahead and get started. This is the group mentoring with Karen Newell, Unlocking the Intelligence of the Afterlife. So I'm happy to be your host today. I'm Carissa Sims. I'm meditation teacher and live event host for Humanities team. So today we would love to hear from you. Karen's going to speak a little bit, and then we're going to answer your questions. So this is all for you. This is a mentoring session where you can ask questions in the chat, or you can also raise your hand and come on camera. And we always love to have people see people. If you'd like to be on camera and hear your question, I think it really just adds to the session, but it's up to you. So I'll be fielding the questions from the chat, and also we will ask you to raise your hand if you'd like to come up with us. All right, so we've got some people, St. Louis, Missouri. Oh, Scotland, that's wonderful. I spent my honeymoon there. Tom from Pittsburgh, Bend, Oregon. So Karen, as people are coming in, would you like to say a few words?
Sure. It's so wonderful to connect with those of you who have been watching those videos that we recorded. And as you have discovered, mine are very focused on generating personal experience. So some of you may have had really intense or maybe subtle personal experiences before this course. And this is your opportunity to kind of go deeper into those kind of experiences. Or some of you may be complete beginners. And so hopefully the audio recordings that have been provided with this course, this masterclass, are helping you to generate some of those experiences. And sometimes it can take time to generate. It's important to realize that we are all unique. So some of us, it will be very easy to generate experience, others not so easy. I'm one it was not so easy for, but it can be done. And so I'm open to any questions you have on any content that we cover, or anything that's going on with your personal experiences or questions you have around that. I'm happy to address.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thanks so much, Karen. So I'm just going to ask a question here. So it says, thank you both to Dr. Alexander and Karen for the modules so far. What do you do with visual images that come during meditation? Do you just allow them, but aren't they likely more random thoughts, just like my imagination? How do we know the difference?
Well, people can be presented with all kinds of different imagery during meditation, and especially when listening to these audio recordings. And so you ask an important question: how do we know which images are important versus maybe just random? And that is going to come from your particular attention and response to them. And so if they're just kind of seemingly random and you don't feel any attachment, I would say those are more just kind of, creations of your mind. But you might be surprised, because some of those images might be wanting your attention, but you're not necessarily giving it. So for example, someone might see a doorway or a bird that's moving. I would say if you see something like that, use your intention to move through that doorway or to follow that bird or that light. And so if an image presents itself that seems like it might have the potential for interaction, use your intention to interact. And of course, some imagery might be very meaningful to you in terms of symbols from childhood or other kinds of events. Loved ones from beyond often use imagery to connect, but in that case, they would probably have an emotional response from you. So there's a wide range, obviously, of ways that you can interpret imagery. But I'd also like to say if someone is not seeing imagery, don't be concerned. So if you're asked to visualize a certain thing and you're not visualizing it in the way that you might expect to here in the physical world, that's okay. We're all going to visualize things in different ways. And our expectation of how imagery should appear can sometimes get in the way because others might explain it as vivid and clear, and ours isn't vivid and clear. And yet it's still, important to us in the experience that we're having. So lots and lots of ways to experience and interact with imagery. I could say a lot more on that, but I know there's going to be some other questions.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like that's so important. I'm not seeing any questions now, so we can talk about imagery more too, or maybe some things that people might feel, or they might see colors, right, Karen? What are some other
There's
things?
so many ways to respond, and you can think of them as based on the 5 physical senses, right? And then beyond that. So some people might have a sense of smell or touch and vision, but vision is sometimes seen as the end all be all of, spiritual journeying. But please don't think that that is the case if you're not seeing visions, because a feeling sense is also incredibly important. And I know for myself that it was really my feeling sense or my knowing sense that really was the most beneficial to me. And I knew this because I was doing a lot of journeying, as we called it, with Kevin Cossie, who you may have learned by now is the co-founder of Sacred Acoustics, and he is the composer of these audio recordings. And when we would do these shared journeys, we would create recordings and then listen at the same time, and then we would share our experiences. And Kevin was quite an expert visualizer. So he would be describing things in vivid detail, and I would say, well, I can't see that. And he would say, well, if you're not seeing it, then you're just making it up. It's a fantasy. And I thought, oh, so my experiences aren't valid because I can't see them. And so he and I set out on experiments that we did between ourselves where he would create a new set of frequencies. We would listen at the same time and then share our experiences. Well, lo and behold, I could describe the same thing he was experiencing, but I wasn't seeing it. It's the same way I was able to do remote viewing. I didn't see the imagery that I ended up drawing, but I knew what to draw. Somehow my internal knowing just had the information. So we have to be careful not to be materialists in the spiritual realm, right? Because here in the physical realm, so many people think that something's not real unless we observe it. So it's natural to bring that feeling into the spiritual kind of realm of experience, because we think, well, I have to see it or it's not real. Not the case. And so there's probably a percentage of you that are seeing things. I would say roughly a third of people are happily seeing things and they think this is just completely normal. But others of you maybe are not. And so imagine, what is it like to bite into a lemon? Do you see it or do you just know what it tastes like and looks like, right? So that's how we can start to become accustomed with, the kind of information that we're getting, whether it's coming through visual, auditory, or other kind of means. And of course, that spiritual knowing is, I think, kind of the best way to experience the spiritual realm, because then you're actually kind of separated from those 5 physical senses, and you're just simply being and receiving and absorbing different types of information. So I hope that's helpful.
Yes, and someone is going to be asking a question, so they're just coming up to the stage. But I was I'm fascinated by that too, because when I meditate, I typically don't see images. I will feel or have that knowing. So that's really confirming, that you're not lesser than, or you don't have, just to have that knowing is also an ability. And I'm curious about your remote viewing. So, when did you start having these abilities, and can you train others to do this? Because I find that fascinating.
Yes, well, remote viewing is completely trainable, and I don't have a natural telepathic ability like many people do. And yet I was able to learn remote viewing. And this was originally developed, for psychic spy programs and things like that. Stefan Schwartz, the SRI, all kinds of people have studied remote viewing, and they actually find that the data to support the reality of remote viewing is the same as the data that we use to take an aspirin every day to prevent heart attacks. So if that research is good enough to get us to take an aspirin every day to prevent heart attacks, then the remote viewing research, which really surpasses that in terms of the reality of it, is absolutely real. But yes, you learn how to do it by removing your normal senses from your awareness. And so you simply have a number that you're given, and that's your target. And all you do is repeat that number, write that number down, and then what are the impressions that come to you? Shapes, colors, temperature, inside, outside, all kind of descriptive words. And then at the end of the session, my remote viewing teacher would open an envelope that had that number on it and show us a picture. And very often I was drawing what was in that envelope. And so I know that we can get it, all of us can get into these states, because my mind was very busy and chatty. And if I can put it aside, then all of us can. I truly believe that. And that's what any remote viewing teacher or experiencer will tell you. It is a learned skill. Although some of us may be more natural at it than others, it definitely can be learned.
Wow, that's incredible. So fascinating. Well,
And
we
I
do
would
have
just add, can
yeah,
I just add
yeah,
that
sure.
remote viewing, in terms of this idea of seeing things versus not seeing things, it was the practice of remote viewing that really demonstrated to me firsthand directly that I was picking up information, even though it wasn't visual. And so that's where I became very confident that the knowings that I have in meditation in these expanded states are real. And what real means is a whole other question, right? So anyway.
Yes, yes, good point. So many realities, real things to explore. Thank you for explaining that and sharing your own journey into learning remote viewing. All right, I'm going to ask you to unmute. We have a question here on stage. So, Margaret, welcome.
Hi. So I'm really enjoying your modules and the binaural beats. They're really, really interesting to do this work. I would like to know more about your struggles to connect. I mean, you've just explained some of what happened, but I've had a few experiences in my life, small ones, and I'm not sure. I'm feeling now like I'm not feeling the more subtle energies. Like, I want something big and flashy and visual, right? And now I'm starting to recognize that what you were just saying, that these subtler things are happening. And so maybe just more of your story, getting to how you're doing now.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of common struggles out there. So don't feel like you're alone. And I remember when I would first learn how to do this, I would be in a room full of people, some who had great, depth of experience, and they were able to speak in ways that kind of made me have experience envy, as they say. But I learned over time that each of us is on our own pathway. So our subtle experiences all add up over time. So I'm with you. I remember feeling that I want a big splashy experience. I want it to be obvious. I want, right? I had all of these expectations of how I wanted my experiences to take place, but they didn't usually unfold that way. Usually I would be quite frustrated with just getting into what I thought was an expanded state. The first thing I learned is that I could be in an expanded state even if I didn't realize I was. And this was through listening to binaural beats. You know, they would say, you know, as I've been suggesting, that we lie down while we listen. And I would be lying there first and just fall asleep. And then after a time, I would be lying there and I would be thinking, well, nothing's happening. I feel exactly the same as when I'm awake. But then I would hear myself snore. And I'm not a big snorer. It's not common for me to snore. So any tiny little noise that I'm making is actually a sign that my body is profoundly relaxed. And so hearing myself snore, I realized I've accomplished the task. My body is profoundly relaxed. My mind is now aware. And so at first, my habit was to wait and see what would happen. And that occasionally I would have something interesting happen. Whether it was a color that would appear, or a sense that I would have, or my grandmother might show up, you know, things like that. And then over time, I realized that when I set an intention, that was way more likely to generate a less subtle experience and stronger experience. Not necessarily stronger in terms of visual or splashy, but meaningful to me. Meaningful in terms of emotional engagement or understanding, to a point where I can release a limiting belief, something like that. So the meaning got a lot deeper for what was going on. And so I speak in the modules about setting intention. I don't want to repeat myself there, but I will reiterate how important it is to set some kind of intention as you go into your meditation. And not all meditation practices ask you to do this. You're simply to, you know, get into that state and let go and see what happens. But setting intention is important. So I would, in your case, Margaret, I would suggest that you start to select words like trust or open or allow. Very simple, but very powerful words that can sometimes get in our way from first generating experience and then recognizing it as meaningful experience. And so watch your emotions as well. Bring in an emotional element to your intention is important. I know when I learned intention through some sources that they taught us just to repeat things, just repeat phrases in my mind, or put a sticky on a bathroom mirror or something so you see it every day and you'll repeat that phrase. But bringing emotional engagement into it is really important. And so this idea that you can trust the universe, this idea that your place within it is sacred and it's your birthright to understand it, having that sense and going into this any type of meditation or expanded mind activity, you know, set your intention. I don't want to tell you what it should be. Some might pick love. But for some of us, love is a little tricky to get to at first. So we might just want to do gratitude, as I spend a lot of time talking about. But I think trust and allowing are really important because those keep you from having expectation of how your experience will unfold. And often when you have no expectation and that true, complete surrender, that's when experiences start to show up, when you stop caring about having them. And I know that sounds strange, but it's finding that balance between, you know, setting that intention and your expectation of how that intention will be fulfilled. So that's where the trust comes in. I've thrown in a lot of concepts there, but I hope that's helpful.
I have another.
Yeah.
You mentioned in one of the videos, and I think it was the first or second, I think this was you, that the person who is noticing that you're not, while you're meditating, that you're not on, you know, blank, or that you're thinking that your brain has gone off on a tangent, is your soul. or your spirit. Could you just expand on that a little bit?
Yes, I actually used to call that perspective your inner observer, and I still interchange that word. So that's a more traditional way that a meditation teacher might explain, the observer within is watching your thoughts, but it's not having your thoughts. So the observer is watching your emotions, but it's not the part of you having the emotions. And so this evolved into this idea of this being our soul's perspective, the part of us that has a broader understanding of what might be going on in one particular event, where, when that event is overwhelming us in that moment or something, we don't necessarily have that contact with that inner observer. But practicing that in meditation, having that broader perspective, eventually can help us when we go into those contentious events. But developing that awareness, it takes time. And at first it just seems strange, like some strange Eastern concept. That's how I looked at it. But I started to understand it when I began to have emotions, and another part of me was completely calm, watching myself have emotions. And I could have this dual awareness, in a sense, where I could be experiencing the emotion and being stuck in my reactive behavior. And that's even during meditation. I might enter emotional kind of events that might cause me to have emotions. So in that meditative state, another part of me that is practiced as the observer or as the soul's perspective is also having an opinion about what's going on, but a neutral opinion, not a judgmental opinion. So developing these, it's kind of like the two angels, the kind of that metaphor of the two angels on our shoulders, the devil on one side, the angel on the other. We can think of having those two conflicting voices in our minds. And so it's just as easy, the next step, to think that we have a neutral perspective in our minds, and also this perspective that's dealing with whatever is going on in the moment. So that hopefully helps you see how that can be helpful and how to develop it. But it takes time. It takes time to really, really feel it. And then one day you'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm sitting over here feeling completely neutral, this part of me, and this other part of me is reacting. So it comes with that direct experience as you move forward.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for those questions, Margaret. I really felt like it added a lot to our conversation and session today. And we have Linda. Welcome. I'm going to ask you to unmute. You can unmute and then ask your question to Karen.
Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. You can't even imagine. Karen, I started listening to your modules, and module 11 really, and I'm sure you don't remember exactly what happened in module 11. I do, because I listened to it twice. About halfway through, in the beginning, you were talking about near-death experiences. I have not had one, but I've had a long, long spiritual journey connecting with spirit. I'm 72 now, so I'm talking about since I was a teenager, when I was doing astral projections in college and had no idea what was happening. I called them at the time astral projections. It was really the body, leaving the body and being able to look and see yourself, look back and see yourself, and just always being so inquisitive and trying to understand my purpose and what am I doing. But in module 11, in about halfway through, Karen, you started to talk about more like not necessarily the NDE experience, but just life experience and things that could start happening in real life. Everything. Before I came to this course, this class, I had no idea where I was. After this long journey, studying and doing and trying to see how to progress in my journey. And what happened to me is when I let all of that go, and you, Karen, call it let go. In the meditations, you so clearly say, let go. And all these years, I thought I was letting go, and I wasn't. I was not letting go. I was trying to find out what I can do. And as soon as I stopped doing that, everything started happening to me. So for the last year and a half, 2 years, truthfully, I thought I was dying. I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis about 10 years ago, which just kept getting more and more painful. And I couldn't understand that. I was doing everything doctors were telling me, but I was also doing things that I thought spiritually would relieve. And it just was getting more and more intense until about it, maybe less than a year ago, when I let go. And I don't know what made me understand that, or even if I ever did. I don't know if I did understand it. I think I gave up is what happened. And I just happened to be on a spiritual path, and the giving up was perfect for me. Some of the things that happened to me outside of meditation is angel numbers. Are you familiar with do you know what a lot of people must know what angel numbers are?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, go on though. I
All
have
over the
plenty
place.
of comments, but I'm waiting for your final question.
Well, I know. I just wanted to give you a few things that were happening to me because I didn't understand it. I didn't understand the angel numbers, except that they were increasing and happening more and more. And it was always happening through seeing like a clock, 1111. And then I finally picked up a book and realized all of my angel numbers were pointing to, keep going, Linda, you're on the right path. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Then I started also seeing at night like orbs. I always at that point knew that I was surrounded. I was thinking that I was all alone. I was isolating myself because everybody I came up against seemed to be on it, in my mind, on a different path, and I couldn't, so I was isolating myself, and that scared me. I really thought, because of the rheumatoid arthritis diagnosis, that I was coming to death, that I was going to die, because I couldn't explain it. I thought that there were spirits around me, but I thought these spirits were preparing me for death. So, and maybe they are, and guess what? It doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter anymore. I guess I lost my last pet about 3 months ago, and she keeps coming back to me. She sleeps on my bed at night, angel numbers, side shadows. I'll see shadows over here, my peripheral vision, and I'll turn and I know that somebody was there, but I haven't seen them here. I've always seen them over here. You said about feelings and knowing. I always have a gut knowing. I'm always with somebody. There's always, every morning I wake up and I thank my spirits and guides and angels and my mom and my cats and everything. So do I have a question? Maybe I don't. Maybe I just want to say thank you.
Well, you're
so
welcome.
From my heart.
You're welcome, Linda. I do want to just share, what you're describing is you're giving up. That was true, real surrender. And you can't manufacture surrender. So when I say let go, and you kind of go, okay, I'll let go of my thoughts right now. But until you actually truly surrender, and that's, I think, what I might have been doing in that module, to find my purpose.
Yes.
I wanted it, written on a piece of paper, handed to me like a school assignment. That's how I think. And it didn't work that way. It's a resonance, a feeling. You described it perfectly. And I want to comment on this idea that, you're seeing a lot more spirits like your deceased pet, and how naturally you thought, well, maybe I'm getting ready to leave this world, and that's why they're showing up. And the data does show us that deceased relatives, pets as well, will begin to show up as you get closer to that moment of passing. However, that can go on for years. I just want to tell you.
Yeah.
And
I'm not scared, but
it doesn't really matter, right?
No, it's very comforting.
Yeah. And so
Very
don't think that your death is imminent. What's happening is your veil is thinning. And the fact
Thank
of
you.
your lifelong experience being open to these ideas and you having this kind of breakthrough recently is likely going to open you up even more. But I don't think it necessarily means that your time of departure is imminent, because
Right.
those kinds of things will increase as you get closer to that moment. But we know of one individual in Australia, he's 99 years old, and he's been having lucid dreams every night about his deceased relatives for years. And he's still with us. He's not demented. And
Yeah. And I, before coming to your course, I did think I was going to be leaving this earth soon, physically, and that was okay. It was okay, but it wasn't okay because I didn't understand what was happening. I will tell you this, that, and maybe this is a question for you. Maybe you've heard people say this, that when I so agree with you. How many times have I in the last 40 years read about surrender? And the first question is always, well, how do I do that? How do I do that? Now I know I didn't have to do anything.
yeah,
It
I
wasn't
think
up to me.
somehow
I didn't do anything.
you sound like your body or your energy knew how to go through that process. You didn't need
Yeah.
to be taught. And it's those of
Yeah.
us who've been through the process that think, oh, now we can tell others how it works.
No,
Until you actually go through it, it's really
no,
hard.
because it didn't happen. It really happened over time. It didn't happen like, and maybe it did happen with a snap of a finger, and I don't even realize that. But my question, I think that I have you ever heard other people? I also realize that I don't have the pain with the rheumatoid arthritis that I did before.
Aha.
Have you ever heard other people say that they're, and I think it's a shift in perception. I think I'm not thinking of the physical anymore.
I think you answered your
Yeah.
own question.
I'm not thinking of the physical anymore, and I'm not focusing on fixing myself.
So
There is
you're
no
living
fixing
a
myself.
you're living this
Yeah.
is how all of us would like to live our whole lives.
I think
And
that,
sometimes
my
it
last-
takes 70 years to get
Yeah.
there. So
yeah. Oh, please.
Yeah.
And that's not a long time either when you think about it. I think many lifetimes. I've always said I've always said to myself, because I've always believed in many lifetimes, and I always said to myself, this is it. I don't want to come back again. I'm not so sure it's up to me once I do cross over. But I always said I don't want to come back anymore. I want to get it now. But the funny thing is,
almost everyone says that, including myself. I'm good.
I want to get it now.
I got it. But I think when we get on the other side, we have that soul perspective. We have a different perspective. So
yeah. And I just love everything you're saying, resonates with me. And I now know why I'm here in this masterclass. I just so had to hear this because it brings me so much joy.
Well,
so I guess that's what I want to share with you.
Thank you, because a lot of people who take our courses already know this information. And if they don't know it, top of mind, somewhere deep inside, they recognize this information. And so I know we're speaking of universal truths. And so when that's the case, people recognize them. And so a lot of people take our courses and just do what you did, validate what they've been going through.
It validated for me. It also brought me back to meditation. For years, I meditated every morning religiously. And then I stopped. And I did what was called like a in the moment, special moments. I would just stop, breathe, calm down. But I stopped meditating. Now you brought me back to meditating.
You were describing
mindfulness. Thank you. Mindfulness.
Also valuable. Yeah.
Yes, it still is valuable. You're right. But you brought me back to meditation with the beats, and I'm your swan. I'm a swan because I bought so many. I bought so many because so many of them resonate with me. And I have these wonderful headphones, and I saturate myself with that, and it's helping me at this point in my life. Incredible. I've never done anything like that before. So
Well,
It's been
Linda, we're
wonderful.
validating each other. So thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you. My heart was beating. Thank you. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Linda, thank you so much for sharing. We so appreciate you being here. So, yes, and I really loved what you shared, Linda, about your pain and how you're not feeling that anymore, because I think that could give people hope, right, Karen? Like that maybe you don't have to be in this pain. Maybe the ascension process, when you let go, can help with that. What do you think, Karen?
I think it can, but we also have to be really careful, because some people, the Western mind, we're used to thinking of do this, then that will happen. We have this causality chain, and in medicine, we take a Tylenol and our headache goes away. And so we want to be careful that we don't just think, well, if I meditate, my pain will go away, right? It's a process. And I don't think that was Linda's intention when she started, but she's becoming more and more attached to that spiritual aspect of who she is, which I hate to say that in the third person, Linda, because I know you're listening, of who you are. But when we all kind of identify more with that spiritual aspect of ourselves, that's when we find that physical things kind of take care of themselves. But again, pain is a tricky one, because everyone is unique, and that pain may be serving a different kind of role in one person's life versus another. And so, I know Anita Morjani, a lot of people are familiar with her story. She is someone who had, she was in stage 4 lymphoma and had tumors, lemon-sized tumors all over her body. She had rejected Western treatment, and but found herself in a hospital there at the end of her, really, she was in the dying process. Her kidneys were shutting down and everything was happening. And she had this amazing near-death experience. And when she came back, her tumors went away. And so she gets she accredits that to this idea that she is now living from that place of love, and that love is what's so important. And to her, she was living in fear of cancer. And so when she flipped that fear into love, it worked for her. But now she gets all kinds of questions. How can I make my cancer go away? And it's not, and the same thing with how to make your pain go away. Certainly this process of, many techniques and methods over time will contribute to that. Or in Anita's case, a slam dunk, one-time near-death experience, but that's not going to happen for everybody. And yet, there's a book by Kelly Turner, for example, Radical Remission. I know Eben talked about this in his modules, but she identified 9 factors that contributed to people's cancer remission. And 6 of those 9 factors were spiritual: feeling a connection to others, more in touch with your intuition, connection to, social support. Those are all spiritual things. And so the more really we can bring spirit into our lives, the more we can assume that physical matters will begin to resolve. But that direct cause and effect, be careful with balancing that expectation.
Yes, thank you so much for saying that. I know I've been diagnosed with cancer myself, and I'm in remission, and it's about the journey, and there's always a purpose. There is something for you to learn and to ascend. So thank you for saying that. All right, Sandra has raised her hand. We're going to ask you to unmute, and you can ask your question to Karen. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Lovely to meet you. And Karen, thank you for this wonderful course. I'm so pleased to be here. I would like to talk about what we've just highlighted about looking at pain and journeys and acceptance and gratitude. I had the most wonderful experience this morning. Where I live in Scotland, it's almost 6 p.m. So this morning I went to community acupuncture, where we go along, we sit in a chair. There's other people around in the room also getting acupuncture. And I have a few small health challenges. I have a lot of other situations in my life which are very demanding of my energy. I have people around me very ill, and quite a lot of bereavement too. And as I was experiencing the acupuncture, and she put the lovely warm blanket over me, I felt such a feeling of gratitude and joy just to be there with the other people all experiencing that. And I spent the whole hour there putting out gratitude and thanking everybody, those who were, say, in care home, or all the lovely people, giving them love, and those who had passed away, thanking them for the joy that they'd given me in my life, and thanking, you know, everything that I could think of, what I have here, my house, my cat, my husband, and so on. And I just felt so amazing afterwards, and such a peace. I was thanking the acupuncturist and sending her loving kindness and everything, and everybody in the room. And wow. And then I went, Karen, into this state where I knew things were happening at a subliminal level. And I can't quite work out what happened, but I think, if I understand correctly, what that means is that something spiritual, something will come up maybe out of that I'm just not quite understanding yet. Thank you. That's my experience today.
Unclear. So you had this beautiful gratitude, and then, which you described that beautifully, but then the issue was what?
Well, that's what I don't understand myself.
Okay.
I seem to, it's a bit like the hypnagogic state, where
so you feel like you're in this state now and you're able to access information you couldn't access before?
Or rather, that I was in a state where there was information, but I can't quite remember it now.
Got it. I got you. Yeah. Yeah. So this is rather common. It can be challenging to when you're, okay, so you're in that hip. First of all, let me comment on that gratitude scene that you described. What a beautiful scene of, you know, that you were sitting there, I imagine, without saying a word, using your heart energy to share the love around you. And how wonderful that this was in a setting where it was people caregiving for others. And so you must have brought, I imagine you brought a beautiful experience to others, and they don't even realize, you know, what was going on. And I love that. We don't have to get, you know, direct validation. We can just observe. Maybe everyone seems kinder suddenly, or I used to do it at business meetings as opposed to like a health setting. That's a beautiful way to do that. But yeah, so then that set you up, it sounds like, for a state where you were more expanded than maybe you're accustomed to. And in that state, this is where people will say it's ineffable, right? We don't have word, we can't find words for it. But if you feel as though you have a sense of receiving information, that information is still available to you. And so a practice that Eben and I both have done is, when we get that sense that you described, that I finally understood, that we can return to that space in a later meditative session, where we can, that our intention can be, remind me of what happened. And you might get a piece, you might get something unusual happen later that day, right? It's not necessarily coming to you as an answer from a professor in a college class, which is, again, how I would like those kinds of things to come to us. But the answers to what was that information that I wouldn't assume that you weren't ready for it. I would assume that more that you weren't prepared for it. And I hope you see the difference there, because over time with practice, you can be better prepared for those moments by when something like that is happening, you just say, all right, I don't know what's going on, but give me all you got, and open to whatever that is. Visions may come, feelings may come, just that whole opening, allowing sense. And that's how you can be more prepared for those moments, to just kick into that. And you can practice that openness and intention. You know, somebody, I think it was Linda, mentioned having these out of body experiences. And that's another thing where once they actually happen, and if you're not prepared, they
Mhm.
kind of just end immediately. You're just go right back
Yeah.
into your body because you're like, oh my God. And that can happen with this receiving of information. Eben calls it a thought balloon, where even during his coma experience, he was given so much information. He has not, even today, unpacked it all. And so that can happen in meditation too, but you just keep going back in, asking for more. And as you become more capable of, which you seem to be well on your pathway, once you're more capable of managing yourself in that space, then it becomes easier to, know more about what's going on. But just getting there is wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you so much, Karen. That really makes sense. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Wonderful to have you back and bringing that Scotland energy to our session today. So Pam has a question in the chat. Can you explain angel numbers, Karen?
Okay, so this is, Linda mentioned those, seeing what she calls angel numbers. These are numbers that often show up in repetitive patterns that people start to notice. And in numerology, there's different meanings to all of these numbers. But I don't know if the specific meaning of someone's interpretation of the numbers is as important as your relationship with those numbers. And so, 1111, incredibly common to see. 444, fours are very common. Anytime you see numbers like all in a row over and over again. So for some, it might be eights. They just see eights everywhere, or it might be a sequence of numbers, 848. It might be your birthday. I'll share with you that I often see 1133, and those numbers pop up a lot for me. And isn't it interesting that when I did my astrology, I was born at 11:33 p.m. And the latitude and longitude, that's what you learn. You tell them the town that you're born in, and the latitude and longitude comes out on the chart. I was born at 111 latitude and 33 longitude. No, I have that backwards. I get those backwards, but 111 longitude, I think, and 33 latitude. I think that makes better sense. So isn't it funny? These numbers show up for me, and they're a part of my birth. And so, I can't explain it, except that when I see those numbers, just as Linda said, when I see those numbers, I'm like, okay, I'm on the right path, or okay, this thing that I'm doing is a good thing. It's almost like confirmation from the universe, a synchronicity, as we call them, that kind of just adds to whatever other information you might be exposed to. And when you see patterns of numbers over and over again, people like to think that that's just the universe's way of letting you know they're aware of what's going on, and that they're supportive of you. And so I think that's where angel numbers comes in, because angels are known to be supportive, non-physical beings. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that was really helpful to me. I love your own story of that. 1133.
I know, right? It's so strange.
What a synchronicity. So yeah, 3 comes in for me. So I have that in my email too, 333. So that's a special number. And for
I
my
love
daughter
threes too, because
you
I was
do,
born
yeah.
on 12/3/63.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And then you have
And
the
threes.
3 longitude.
Yes.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I mean, it's like whatever it means to you. Sometimes I like to look it up, but also, just like Karen said, what does it resonate? Is it confirmation? Are you asking a question at the same time? So it's also interesting, I find, to do research on the numbers. I like to find the meaning, and numerology is powerful as well. So we have a comment here. I also see a lot of angel numbers nowadays, sometimes more than, oh my gosh, a lot, 30 a day. Some numbers mostly repeat during the day. So they're going through a Kundalini Awakening. Well, congratulations. That's amazing. So Kundalini Awakening, I mean, what do you consider that? Is that just ascension, or how is that defined to you,
Well,
Karen?
a Kundalini awakening, from my understanding, is related to your chakra energy centers. And so in theory, there's a little snake coiled down, this is energetically speaking, coiled down at the bottom of your base chakra. And as you awaken to spiritual knowing, in some cases, people will feel that energy rising up their spine and all the way into the heart, all the way up to here. And I actually have a listener of our recordings, who was listening to Light Body, and she had been listening to it for a while, about 18 months, she'd been listening to other recordings for about 18 months. So she was very accustomed, but then she started listening to Light Body. And that particular recording, for her, she felt her energy rising from her base, coming up, and she stopped it because it made her nervous. And one day she allowed it, and other people, when they can happen unbidden, this sort of energetic awakening, but they can also be cultivated. And sometimes people can go a little too fast towards the cultivation of these experiences. So a Kundalini awakening for some can be quite destabilizing, because on the one hand, you feel this amazing connection to, the spiritual realm, and you can see energy and all living things. Maybe you'll see trees that are vibrating and flowers or something. And all of us might be thinking, wow, that would be so cool. But at the same time, if this goes on and on for days, like it has for some, it's very hard to function in the world. So be careful what you wish for, is my advice there with the Kundalini awakening. But lots of folks, it'll happen through different types of meditative and energy activating experiences. It'll happen unbidden. Others are, consciously cultivating this experience. I don't know the situation in this case, but I also see this person said they were having communication from deceased loved ones recently, and lots of vibration and emotional release. So all of this is really speaking to just becoming more open and awakened to spiritual aspects. So I would caution anyone to proceed cautiously if these experiences are happening easily for you, because you do want to be able to manage your function here in the material world. But I think it's really important not to ignore these kinds of things. Some people get afraid, and they think, well, no, I just need to focus on this world, and those things are unknown. And I don't think that's the case for the people in this course. You obviously aren't afraid of these things, but that's the other extreme. But I think they're important. You're to open to these types of experiences, because it makes you realize you're way much more than just your physical body. And this helps you to live in this world with a greater perspective and a greater understanding of our interconnections, and how the world really works. So it's not we don't teach these concepts to escape this world, but to integrate this kind of soul perspective into your daily life. It sounds like that's what you're doing, and that it doesn't disturb you. Oh, it's happening on its own. Yeah, so it sounds like you're okay with this. Some people, it's disturbing, it's not, but it's probably happening on its own through other seemingly unrelated activities are probably contributing to this. And that can be any form of meditation. Your dream life might be more active. You might have been through a recent illness or emotional trauma. I don't know what the catalyzing event was, but when you say it's happening on its own, I expect that there is some causal effect that maybe you're just not putting together yet.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing in the chat. Appreciate you. They said it's happening since April 2023, and thank you.
Oh,
Karen.
very recent. Okay, so yeah, proceed carefully. And you seem to be very well adjusted from your comments. So if you're not, and you have a concern, I would be happy to address it. So
thank you, Karen. And we do have another question from Margaret. So feel free to, I'm going to ask you to unmute and you can ask your question to Karen.
Well,
Thank you.
I think in one of your later modules, I'm pretty sure you said you noticed, or you learned to notice, when you were in the hypnagogic state versus in a regular state. So I would like you to talk about that.
Well, part of that is, if you're lying down, is that I mentioned earlier, the hearing yourself snore. So even though you just feel like you're just lying there, some clue that your body is actually more relaxed than you think. One thing I try to do is I'll try to lift my finger. And if I'm laying there and I think, is this just normal or not? And if I used to do this, if I try to lift my finger and it doesn't lift really easily, then your body's pretty relaxed. Other things that can happen are body twitches. So sometimes as you're falling asleep at night, especially if you're really exhausted, you might feel little twitches in different parts of your body. That can happen when you're going into a hypnagogic state as well. So I'm speaking of the hypnagogic state specifically that's consciously generated. The ones that you get in naturally every day as you're falling asleep at night, you're probably just falling asleep and not trying to say, am I in that state or not? But it's kind of like the opposite, but the same as lucid dreaming. So lucid dreaming is where you're in a dream, you're clearly asleep, but your awareness suddenly realizes, oh, I'm dreaming. And in some cases, you can manage the dream experience as it unfolds. But with the sacred acoustics recordings, or binaural beats, getting into that hypnagogic state, we're getting into that lucid, asleep awake state, but from an awake state. So that was really helpful for me to think of it as, oh, I'm going into a lucid dream, but from an awake instead of an asleep state. And that kind of helped me recognize, what dream states feel like. And they can be rather similar. And some dreams that are just fleeting and, kind of regurgitating information from the day don't really have as much emotional impact as maybe some other more meaningful dreams. And so you can apply that same kind of evaluation when you're in a hypnagogic state with binaural beats. Does that make sense?
Yeah, maybe a little more. When you say you recognized you were snoring, doesn't that mean you were asleep?
It means my body was asleep.
Oh,
my mind was aware.
oh,
right?
okay.
Because normally you wouldn't hear yourself snore
Yeah,
because your mind is asleep.
okay.
So I learned from all the Bob Monroe technology. They call it mind awake, body asleep.
Oh,
And so that's very useful
okay.
way to look at it. The other way you can kind of tell is over time, when you get that dual awareness thing going that I talked about earlier, that becomes much more easy to do when you're in those states. So
just say a little more about dual awareness.
the thing about the observer who notices your thoughts versus the thoughts themselves.
Okay.
Think of that as two separate things. I mean, we like to say, oh, one mind, it's all part of everything, but our Western mind needs a construct. And so if you think of them as two different things, your emotions and the observer of your emotions, your thoughts, the observer of your thoughts. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Again, after a time, just like Linda was saying, oh my God, I didn't get it. I didn't get it. Oh my God, I got it. When she finally surrendered, you will get it. This particular dual awareness, as I say.
Okay.
Thank
you.
Some things are, we can speak about things. And I had many teachers explain things to me as well. But it wasn't until I actually went through it that I understood. And I think this really makes me understand Eastern teaching a lot more, because I'm a Western mind, like most listeners. We think in a little differently, like things need to be given to us in linear order with words and all spelled out. But Eastern teachers would just ask you some question that you were supposed to ponder. And my Western mind didn't like that method of teaching at all. But now I understand it because until you actually experience something, you may not fully understand the concept, but I think we can still mix the methods for Eastern and Western minds. So
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Margaret. Well, our time is up. So we have a comment here. Thank you for your insightful and inspirational mentoring session. So their questions have been answered. So
I love this
wonderful.
comment though. I realize I've been trying too hard, so I need to just experience letting go. Yeah, if you guys can, if you guys have a chance, is this recorded so people can watch it again?
Yes.
Then yeah, listen to Linda. She's like, she described the experience of going through this in a beautiful way.
Yes, she did. Well, thank you so much for all of your wisdom, Karen. It was such a pleasure hosting here today. And thank you everybody for joining us. Hope to see you on the next mentoring session.
Yeah, and can I just add, we
Yes.
have to, it's useful to remember Yoda, speaking of wisdom, Yoda from Star Wars, who says, there is no try, only do. And so when you say you're trying too hard, you want to change your language around that and use a word like practice. You're practicing, you're not trying. And that can be helpful too, to change that language. Thank you all for coming, and best wishes on your continued explorations of your spiritual nature.
Thank you so much, Karen. That was very inspiring and empowering at the end. I love that. So many blessings. Have a good day, everybody. Bye.
Namaste.
Namaste.